morning, YouTube. Welcome to Moose Preparedness. I am Moose. So, as you can tell by the windshield, it's a nice balmy day here in the south. Winter is on its way. Winter is coming. And I was asked in an earlier video to talk about, hey, what to do to prepare for winter. What are we doing with the colder weather? Now, for some of you in the northern climates, you actually get all four seasons in a fairly fantastic manner. And so you might already be experiencing some of this, so sorry it's a little late for y'all. But for those of you who are just now starting to see the sun start to go out later and later and starting to feel the cold, figured I'd give you a couple of tips that we use both in the military and I use my personal life for staying warm. So the number one thing, sorry, gotta love it when you're taking videos and you're driving. The sun has a tendency to ruin shots. So one of the biggest things that we talk about in the military is layering. So the Army has its EQWC system, it's an extreme cold weather system. EQWC, ECWS, I believe. Don't quote me on it. But bottom line is it involves a system of systems. If you haven't figured out that the Army or bureaucracy in general likes to have systems of systems of systems. And so theirs is all centered around layering. So like this, which would be what they call silkies, or used to be polypros if you're way back in the day. It's kind of like long underwear, but it's silk. Or a silk feel to it. But it's your base layer. So the Army centers everything around layers, and while you're sitting still, not doing anything, you layer up. And so one of the biggest things you have is you have your base layer. I always put a t-shirt on over it. Then you can go up onto your next layer where you've got, they have a fleece that is an inner garment, not an outer garment, but people still wear it as an outer garment, and just to watch Sergeant Major's heads explode because it's kind of fun to watch. And then you've got a light jacket, then you've got a heavy jacket that's Gore-Tex, so waterproof material. So you layer it up. Same thing goes down for your bottom. So there's a silk bottom that you can put on underneath this. And then you just layer up there. However, they focus predominantly on your upper body. Why? Because you lose most of your heat out of your upper body. If your housing group here all keeps warm with all of your major vital organs, you tend to, survive. Can you live without a leg? Yes. Does it suck when your feet and legs are cold? Absolutely. But you'll still be alive. And that's kind of their school of thought. Now, having said that, I've also been the unfortunate recipient of being out into places where I did not have, sorry, my little mount is really not wanting to play nice today. I have been in places, specifically in Eastern Europe, where it was freezing cold and it's muddy and gross, and my feet and my hands absolutely got some cold weather damage to them. So the important things that I've noticed that help to keep your feet in good shape, because again, if you have to be the unfortunate person that has to leave their main area to go bug out, right? So everybody thinks bugging out is super sexy. It's not. It's a super high risk operation in my opinion, and I'll probably do a video on that in the very near future. But in order to keep your feet in good shape, you want to make sure that you have, again, multiple layers and backup layers. So I typically hate the winter boots for the United States military. They are super thick. They're like clodhoppers. But that said, they are Gore-Tex, which means, again, Gore-Tex is a material. It's waterproof. They also have their own internal sleeve or layer where it's literally like a quilted sock. I think I still have my little booties from beforehand. Then you have your sock, and then if you want, you can even put an additional sock. One that actually has worked really well for me in my experience is using dress socks. Dress socks are thin. They tend to wick away moisture pretty good in terms of getting them off your foot. So I've used them for both while I ruck. So you have 2 layers of socks while you ruck, so your feet don't get that outer layer wet, and that outer layer that doesn't rub on you and therefore causing blisters. But I've also found it does really well for keeping my feet warm from the same token. Additionally, socks are a big deal if you get make sure you get the right ones. Cotton kills. I hate cotton. Like, this shirt right now is not cotton. This one is a mesh. And I got it specifically because if a cotton shirt gets wet, it takes for flippin' ever to dry out. And it makes you cold. So, I don't remember who said it, but there's usually the rule of threes. You can be, so the threes are cold, wet, and windy, right? So the weather is fine if it's if it's two of any one of those. So if it's cold and wet, if it's cold and windy, or if it's wet and windy. But if you add all three together, it's supremely miserable, and that's when you have to start worrying about cold weather injuries. Why do I bring that up? Well, because yours truly did not have the proper material. Why? Well, the Army likes to always give those who dress using the proper material a hard time for not being as hard. Oh, I'm tough, I don't get cold. And unfortunately, in my younger years, I've paid attention to that. Call it bravado, call it a myriad of things, call it being too dumb, call it trying to be, alpha male, look at me, I can do it, you can do it too, kind of thing. But bottom line is that I didn't have the cold weather boots. I did not have the booties in. I had normal boots, which are typically your summer boots. So for the military, they use a summer boot because it's lighter weight. If I'm going to be humping around stuff all day, pounds equals pain. So ounces equal pounds equal pain is the expression. So if my boots go from being a couple of pounds, like 2 pounds, to 4 pounds, it's now twice as hard to slog through that same distance. So you've got that, plus they take up extra room, and also if it's not cold weather and it's fine, now I have to carry a second pair of boots, which is a pain in the ass. Now I'm doubling or tripling my needs, right? So I didn't have those boots on. I had my summer boots. I had my waterproof socks to keep my feet dry, but I did not have the liner socks, and I did not have a very good set of socks for wicking away moisture. I had standard nylon. They're kind of a nylon polyester blend is what most of the Army socks are. They weren't cotton. I have since gotten rid of all of those and switched over strictly to wool because wool does better. Even if it's hot in the summertime, it still does better. And I absolutely, like today it's 50 degrees right now according to my truck. It was about 46 on my ruck this morning. Most people, used to be in the past, it wasn't cold for me. Now I have to wear warmer socks because my feet start to hurt, specifically my toes. All right, so that gets your lower extremities. Typically your thighs don't get as cold because you got muscles, and if you're moving, you're usually just fine. It's also one of those parts of your body where you don't have a ton of nerve endings, so I've noticed you don't really have that same amount of pain like if you get cold elsewhere. All right, let's move to your hands. I have gloves all the time for most operations now. I look like a big old sissy. For example, this morning, I'm out walking around rucking. It was too dark to film a video there because it was early and we haven't switched over to daylight savings yet, so I'm out rucking and I'm out there with a jacket on, my plate carrier. I have shorts on because, again, my legs don't get cold. I have socks and shoes, right, with warmer socks, and I have mittens on. Black fleece runner's mittens, if you will. And I probably looked, to me, I feel like I look ridiculous, right? Because, again, how is that hard? How is that tough? It's literally because my fingers start to lose sensation in the fingertips, and I start to get extremely, I won't say extremely bad, but I definitely get cold pain in my fingers. Probably, again, from that same field exercise I was doing out in Eastern Europe, where I did not have the proper gloves. I had your standard military gloves, like these ones, right? So I have these types of gloves, which are great if you're manhandling a machine gun, but they don't really give you a whole lot of warmth. They give you protection against, getting stuff poked through, and gives you an extra barrier, but it doesn't give you a ton of warmth. And so again, gloves got wet. I didn't have backup gloves with Gore-Tex on them, so I suffered Fast forward a little bit further, doing that sniper competition earlier was it this year? Yeah, it was this year. The weather was great, fantastic weather, but I still brought gloves just in case, these small black pair of gloves. And that saved my bacon because the weather dropped. Granted, it's in January, you never know, and sometimes it's in the mid 50s and 60s and it's perfect, like it was the last day, but there was a day right in the middle where it was just cold, wet, and rainy, and windy, so it was miserable. But if I hadn't had those gloves, I mean, it got to the point where I couldn't even work the action of my rifle. I was shooting an AR-styled rifle, and I could not get the button for the magazine release. Couldn't get that one to go because my thumb just couldn't press hard enough. Sounds ridiculous, right? I also had trouble manipulating the charging handle because these fingers were stiff. All because I didn't have the proper equipment. So I have since rectified that. So I do have my little black running gloves, but I also have a set of weatherproof Gore-Tex gloves for whenever I go into places where things are going to be cold and wet. Extremely important, especially when you're talking about a disaster or survival scenario. You cannot do things if these are not working. It just won't happen. So that's a huge deal. I mean, how are you going to work? You know, if you've never been hunting and it's been so cold out that you're considering. True story, no stuff. There I was in. I think we were in the Midwest. Yeah, Midwest at that stage. Sorry, I'm trying to piece. For those of you who've been in the military, you know that things blur together between deployments and moving all around and years. Dates kind of get confusing, but we were in the Midwest and it was 14 degrees below zero. It was cold. I went out hunting because, hey, that's an excellent opportunity. Guess what? The deer move. So when deer are cold, they start moving. So here I am thinking, hey, this will be a fantastic opportunity for me to try and put meat in the freezer. And I was out there, I was all dressed up, I had proper equipment, I was good to go. But when you're sitting there, I was out of the wind, I had a blind. It was a pop-up blind, but it was out of the wind. I had hand warmers in my pockets, I had hand warmers in my bottom pockets, I had hand warmers in my hands. I was good. Or at least I thought I was. I had hot coffee, good to go. When you sit there for 2 to 3 hours and it's that cold, I had a deer come out, and I think I was in a bow-only area. So I grabbed my bow, and I'm drawing the bow back, and I'm shaking like this. Not because I got buck fever. I've had buck fever before. For those of you who've never experienced buck fever, that's when you see a monster of a buck come out, and you're super excited to shoot the deer, that you start shaking because you're worried about missing the damn deer. So they call it buck fever. Anyway, I pull it back and I start shaking, not because I'm excited, because I'm so damn cold. And I realize if I shoot this deer, I'm going to have to field dress it, and it's 14 degrees below zero. Then I'm going to have to carry it multiple miles, because I always hike back in away from the roads and things like that in this weather, which isn't bad, but it's like, do I really want to do that? Is this deer, it was a small doe, is this small doe, which will probably net me 30 pounds, 40 pounds, worth it? And can I actually make a good shot? Because if you've never shot bow before, and you draw it back, and you're shaking like this, trying to get control of that shot, it ain't gonna happen. So I actually passed on that deer strictly because of the fact it got so cold and I was not able to make a good shot in good conscience, as well as I personally was like, I don't know if I can actually field dress the deer out here. I mean, the deer meat would have been fine. It would have kept. It was cold enough. But like, good golly, that is a level of cold that I hadn't experienced before. So that's why it's so important to have that thermoregulation. Finally, your head. Head, face, and extremities. I never go anywhere without a fleece PT cap. For those of you who don't know what those are, they're typically black for the Army PT folks. for the Army PT. Marines and Navy, I think, have a brown one. I carry the brown one too because I think it actually matches our uniform better. And when we're actually allowed to wear the damn thing, again, the Army issues you stuff and then they tell you don't wear it because, you know, we have to make... There's rules upon rules, there's bureaucracy, but there's a lot of it where it's like, hey, we issue these things, but we're only going to allow people to wear it if everybody has it, and we all have to have the same thing because we have to look uniform. Again, look at the sergeant majors whose eyes explode whenever somebody doesn't have something. So you can't wear the brown one because the brown one's not issued and as part of the PT gear and blah, 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 blah. Anywho, that brown or that fleece PT cap is one of the better pieces of gear that the Army has, and I use it for anytime I go travel. I always bring it with me because it's one of those things I can pull over my eyes and I'm out. It's also very good at cutting the wind. I have never had issues with it where my ears have gotten cold from it. Now, the only downside to it is it doesn't protect anything in your face. So usually the bottom of my ears will get a little bit chilled, and then my big old schnoz will get chilled off because I don't have that covered. I would highly recommend, if you're looking at stuff to get, look for a, what is it, a balaclava? I don't want to say baklava because I'm used to that from Iraq, but like a balaclava where it covers up your mouth and your face. You can get ones from anywhere. They're like the stereotypical robber masks, you know, where they're like black and they cover up everything except for your eyes. They're really useful. I've got one that's, I'm not championing their gear because I don't even remember where the hell I got it. I don't know if they're even still in business, but I got one from Nordic Gear that's camo pattern, and it covers the bridge of my nose, and it has little vent holes on the bottom. Because one of the things you'll notice if you wear balaclava is that if you've got eye protection on, like I almost always have eye pro on, if you have one on, the steam goes up and it gets into your glasses, and your glasses start to freeze, and they get, so that steam gets up in there, fogs them up, and then it'll start to freeze on there, especially if it's cold out. So I try and find the one that's got the holes in it, so that way I can release some of the breath and steam through there, so it doesn't mess with my eyewear as bad. So those are the big ones. I've never had to go to the extreme cold weather like goggles, like some of the folks have had to do up further north in Alaska. Not a bad idea to have. The problem is they're just very cumbersome. The nice part about them is that they tend to be fog proof because of the coatings they put on them, versus like these are ballistic eyewear from Oakley, and they absolutely are not fog proof. I use them all the time, and I frequently, especially if I'm shooting, I have to go like that every now and again just to get them to warm up, so they go up on my bridge of my head, my giant forehead heats them up. Other small things, hot liquids are a fantastic thing to have. I've already talked about the jet boil that I was using for keeping liquids warm. Having one of those in your emergency pack is a great idea because then you can warm up water on the spot. I always have a thermos or some way to keep water and fluids warm. If you're out, sorry, it's a new invention for me trying to do it on this little holder because, you know, hands freeze a thing. But having a way to thermoregulate with hot food, I really like doing hot bone broth. Tends to do really well because A, it's lower calories, B, it's got a lot of vitamins, minerals, essential nutrients, things like that to kind of keep your body going. It also has salt in it. For those of you who have never had to do it, work outside, you go through, if you try and pound the water, you can actually get really sick because you don't have enough of your salt left. So I try and make sure I regulate. Other thing before I forget, if you are sitting still and wearing your stuff, like I'm sitting still, so I've got my top on. Once you start moving and you start doing things, if you start to sweat, take stuff off. Why? Because sweat kills. If this gets super soaked and I then have to stop for several hours, I now have cold water that's right up against my skin, and that creates significant issues with thermoregulation. So if I know that I'm going to go out for, let's say, a ruck, and I show up in this, before we even start the ruck, I've already taken my silks off, and I'm usually already down to a t-shirt and my top, because I know within the first mile or two, I'm probably going to be a little chilly. It's going to suck. Not a lot I can do about that, but I also know after that first mile or two, I'm probably going to be getting warm, and I do not want to get all of my cold weather gear hot and sweaty. Sorry, I'm trying to block some of the sunlight for you. That ain't gonna help. You're just gonna have to bear with it because of where I'm going right now. Again, super awesome film quality. I know my production team is fantastic because you're looking at them. And this morning, Bob's not working in my favor. So make sure that if you are start working, that you start to disrobe some of your hot weather stuff. That's why you'll frequently see folks who are chopping wood, who are hunting, things like that. Once they're actually physically moving, like if they're moving to a spot, if they're moving from a spot, if they're doing a physical activity, you'll all of a sudden see these lumberjacks where they're like wearing a flannel shirt and that's it. That's because they're trying to make sure that as they're moving and they're hot, they are good to go. They're keeping their body warm. They should be fine. But as soon as they stop, that's when you start to see the coats come out. So that way they can keep that heat, because they know that if anything gets super sweaty and wet, that's a death sentence in the cold. Anyway, hope you found this video useful. If you did, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell me I'm right, tell me I'm wrong. I'm trying to grow the channel out so I can get this to reach as many people as possible, not because I'm vain, not because I'm trying to make money, mostly because I've been doing lots of stupid stuff for long parts of my life that have given me unique opportunities and unique insights that a lot of folks may or may not have had. And I want to try and make sure that I spread that wealth around because, whoa, I know it's not common. And I'd rather make sure that everybody else is taken care of and I can help provide for that. Thanks again. Stay safe out here.